Welcome to The Learning Curve.
A podcast about insights, inspiration and innovation in higher education. My name is Van de Poel.
My name is Sharon Klinkenberg. We are lecturers communication science at the University of Amsterdam.
And we work for the Teaching and Learning Center of the Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Welcome, dear listeners. Happy you're joining us for yet another episode of The Learning Curve. Today we'll discuss what piece of the puzzle of course design the large lecture is.
Yeah, so we look back at our previous podcast, our first actual podcast, and I was a bit discontent with our first podcast. I thought, well, is our only message to make students enjoy the lecture? Is that all we have to say? So you listened to it too? What did you think, Van?
Yes, well, I always start with positive feedback. I think we had a good vibe going on.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. We had fun.
Which is also important, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, our listeners also have to enjoy it. So I hope listeners enjoyed it. But you're right, we focused a lot on enthusing students, but we both agree that, of course, it's more than that. The lecture would be a bit expensive if it's only to entertain our students,
Indeed.
right? But it's also not only sending information. So what is it? What is the role of that large lecture in the larger course?
Exactly, and specifically from a more involved way of looking at the lecture than just the lecture on its own, because, well, we have video recordings. Sometimes we do a live stream from the lecture. So the lecture is not sometimes just sitting together in a large hall, lecture hall, but it's also thinking about where do we need the recordings for? Does the recording have a piece of the puzzle that needs to go into the larger course design?
Exactly, because it's not only the lecture, it's oftentimes combined still with tutorials, you have assignments, so students working at home. What is the role of the lecture in that big puzzle? And how does that add to the learning of the students?
Exactly, yes. For me, I see the lecture from both these three perspectives. So the first one is, of course, the sitting together in the lecture hall with the students that want to be there.
Yeah.
And I explicitly state the students that want to be there. They have to sign up to come, and they don't have to come. But if you sign up, then you are prepared, and we have a list of behaviors that we want to see in the lecture. We've discussed the need for interaction and the need for engagement. Yeah. But for me, I still have quite a bit of knowledge sharing, because I do think that the engagement has to be connected to the topic at hand. And I try to look at the book that we have and see where can we add some depth on the topics, and essentially also model that behavior, that interaction between the teacher and those students that actually want to be there, to the rest of the students that watch it at home or watch the live lecture in the recording. Yeah. So it has a very specific role.
Can I stop you there for a minute? I hear you say two things here, actually. So the second thing is that you're also modeling this behavior of interaction and how to engage with subject matter, right?
Yes.
And getting out of your comfort zone, speaking up, thinking out loud or in your head about what's going on. So you're modeling that. That's one thing. That's one goal of the lecture. The other one thing that you mentioned is the knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
And you say, and I think this is a very important part, because I think for most lecturers, the lecture is about knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
They skip that second part that you talked about, but that second point, but they share knowledge. And what I like about what you're saying is that I look at the readings and I try to go beyond that.
Yeah.
So you're not basically repeating what is, in your case, written in a book, but for another course might be repeating exactly a study as it was conducted and written up in a paper, because students can read that at home.
Yeah, indeed.
So what is your knowledge sharing then? Can you specify that a little bit more?
So sometimes it's on the topic, of course, of research and statistics. So where a student can read in the book how to perform a moderation analysis, and you can look at the graphs, but in the lecture we go a bit more in depth, try to visualize this. What does this mean? Can we have a 3D model that we move around at some point, and then I turn it in this specific direction that you you see in the 3D space 3 lines, and then we switch back to SPSS, and you hear the students say,
I'm so proud of you.
and that sound, that's very satisfying. I look back, and I have that every year. I know this is where we build up to, and then the penny drops. It's not just about what they've read in the book, but they see how it fits into the larger thing. So,
but now I would say, as a listener who wants to critique,
yeah,
you know what? Sharon, you're really good with recording videos. You're technical. You're awesome with this. Just record a great video in which you show all of this and give that to the students every year, and they'll have their aha moment at home.
Yeah, I've been at this point where I thought, well, if I hear myself repeating stuff that I said the last year, then I shouldn't be saying that. But I came back from that because I do think that it's not just about knowledge sharing, but it's also the interaction that you want to foster. And I think it's the combination of both these things that, for me at least, is worthwhile still doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of just watching a video in which you show that 3D model and you... what do? You talk to students, you ask them questions in the meantime,
indeed.
or give them little assignments, or...
Look at this picture. Keep it in your head for a second. Okay. What do you think that the next will be?
Yeah.
Try to draw it down.
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going there.
Yeah.
Did you expect this?
Yeah.
Yes. No. Why not?
Yeah.
So those kinds of questions.
Exactly.
And I really try to get them out of their happy place, sitting back and just looking and consuming. And I really try to make that explicit, to tell them you need to think about these topics, because if you're only sitting back and listening, then...
It's not a Netflix show.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
When we taught online during COVID, I could see students on the couch sitting back. I see you sitting back on the couch. Come on over to the camera. Show me you're engaged. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but this is a nice example that you just provided. I also want to relate this a little bit to other topics because, of course, we are both methods teachers. We teach statistics and methods of research. And you could say, well, then it's fairly easy to have this interaction or come up with these ideas. But I believe that this is something that you even more could apply to, say, a lecture about politics. Because you have so much topical information.
Indeed.
That is not in your textbook. That is not in the research papers that the students have to read because they're outdated already.
Yes.
Right? The data have been collected at least a year before you are discussing that article in class. So use your time when preparing a lecture, not trying to get all the knowledge on slides and trying to convey all that knowledge to your students because they can find that online, in books, in articles. But show your vision.
What's actually on your slides? On yours?
I'll get back to that.
Okay.
Let me finish this point and I'll get back to that because I know where you're going right now. And that is a longer discussion. But use your take, your vision, your opinion, your angle on a specific point. You know, in terms of politics, where do we stand in political science, and how does that relate to what's going on in the world right now?
Yeah.
And that is what you can add.
My colleague, because the course that I gave was scientific and statistical reasoning, and I did the statistics part, and my colleague did the reasoning part.
Yeah.
And the reasoning is about biases that we have in reasoning, but also try to formalize the reasoning. So what are the premises and what is the conclusion? And he always tried to get memes from the internet or current topics or political topics, political statements that were made by politicians, and deduce the reasoning and try to relate that to the topic at hand, the things that they were learning.
Yes.
And that was the combination. Indeed.
Exactly. And what you're doing at that moment is making the subject matter tangible to students. Yeah. That is very important. It should not be abstract. It should not be a research paper that's interesting to you but not tangible to students. This way they engage.
Yeah.
And this is what makes them more interested in what you're teaching in the remainder of the course, or makes them more engaged during a tutorial, because now it's tangible to them and now they can almost feel and touch it and know what they're doing.
What I also do and like so much is that we build up quite a bit in this course and they learn a lot. And then at this one point, I take a research paper, published research paper that is not that good. I know I won't say the name from the person that published this paper, but there are many flaws in it. And it's short. So we'll have them read it in the lecture hall and try to see, well, they hypothesized this, but they actually did this analysis. And what would you do? So it's really engaging, and they really feel empowered that they know more about the topic at this point than the author of this. And that's that. There you see them light up, and yes, I can do this. I know this.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about activating students in our last episode. So this is a way of activating them. We gave examples of also physical activation, and you need to change what you're doing during a lecture. But another way of activating means that you let them reflect, you let them get into their head, you let them think about what you're talking about. Yeah. And that is activating the students as well. Well, the empowering, that's an amazing thing, of course, because their self-efficacy will go up.
It's really by design. And that's the thing I would want the listeners to take away, that you as a teacher design this. You think about where can I put this point where they feel empowered, and I have to choose a topic and the paper where they can actually be empowered, because I could also pick another one where they would just read it and would have no idea.
Yeah. So, and also, in which lecture do I do this?
Yes.
Within looking at the course,
the broader scope,
the broader scope of the course, where is it useful to do this type of action? And how does that relate what they do in a tutorial next? Or is it something I want to do right before a big assignment or an exam, for example?
I haven't thought about that indeed. I do think about where does it need to be in terms of what knowledge do they already need to have, but putting it specifically before they write their final paper or something, because then they feel empowered because, that's a good one.
Yeah, so thinking about it, not just about your lecture and not just about they need to know, you have your learning outcomes. They need to know a lot. But think about the whole design of your course and how you'll tackle these learning outcomes in different ways, in different parts of your course, and let them align. So what you do in your lecture should be aligned with what's been done at home, and at the same time what they do in class. And it should be aligned with when you have an assignment. So the alignment of
what you do, all the pieces of the puzzle.
All the pieces, exactly. The pieces of the puzzle should fit. Yeah. And
so having indeed preparatory assignments for the tutorials that you have, so you make sure that they are prepared coming into the tutorials. And that's always a big thing, right?
Yes.
In how much, how can you make sure that they actually do the preparation work?
Yeah.
So you have to, especially when you have very large courses like ours, you have to build in something where it's kind of mandatory that they do it. And that there can be many ways to that, and that's a topic on its own. But
exactly.
It is important to have the students prepped. And if you can time everything in such a way that they have the lecture in the beginning of the week, they have the preparatory assignment during the next 2 days, and then the tutorial, then you have an optimal fit.
That sounds like heaven to me, but that's...
It never works because you always have restraints. And,
exactly.
But we try, right?
We try. Okay, Sharon, thinking of time, I did dodge the bullet on slide design.
Maybe we could get back on that one in the next one.
And in the next episode, we'll talk about slide design. Yes, that's what I wanted to talk. I think slide design, or at least what do you show your students during a lecture, or also during another presentation or in a tutorial. So that can be a bit broader. And you just mentioned another thing as well, on how to get students to class prepared.
Yes.
That is a whole different
topic,
record several podcasts about that, and maybe invite someone as well who would like to share about this. Yeah. But for now, what is the main message for our teachers, the take-home message?
Think about, if you give large lecture, where does it fit in the total course design? So what's the piece of the puzzle for your lecture? Is it only getting the students together, or do you also need it at certain spaces in the rest of your course design? And, how do you make that available to students?
Yeah. Wow.
That's it.
That's it. It's a wrap.
Don't forget to subscribe, because if you subscribe, then you will be notified by our new podcast. So head on over to your favorite podcasting service, and we'll speak to you in the next one. Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Learning Curve.
Produced by the Teaching and Learning Center of the Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the University of Amsterdam.
Our music was provided by Peter van Dijk.
For more information, find us wherever you get your podcasts.